Let's all stand and honor America by reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I just wanted to be sure that everyone got the notice if they didn't get it on email. Mary Alexander was supposed to be here this evening, but we do have an unveiling at the Washington County, Tennessee. The Washington County Board of Commissioners and the Washington County Heritage Committee request the honor of your presence and participation in the inaugural unveiling of the historic documents of the nation in the great state of Tennessee, Monday, June 23rd, 2014 at 5 p.m. at the George Janes Justice Center. So we hope to see you there and have a good support. I think it'll be real important to all of us and to the trust as well as to Washington County. Mr. Zawal, you want to come up and introduce Mr. Myers, who's going to take us back a few years in the history? Thank you.
Our speaker this evening is Mr. Urban Myers, a Civil War historian and author. He retired in a career in the United States Army, serving both in the Korean and Vietnam Wars. A descendant of a member of the 53rd Pennsylvania, Mr. Myers has used this interest to forge his story. His nationally acclaimed book, We Might As Well Die Here, he's got a few copies available this evening if you would like one. His nationally acclaimed book, We Might As Well Die Here, is an account of the history of the 53rd Pennsylvania Veterans Volunteer Infantry. His interest in this unit came firsthand from his grandmother, the daughter of a Civil War veteran. She shared with her grandson, Mr. Myers, many stories told her by her father and his fellow soldiers. Mr. Myers is accompanied this evening by his wife of 65 years, Sally, and their daughter Susan of years. If you would please stand, Susan and Sally, if you would please stand. We did not introduce them earlier. Because we are in the state of Tennessee, there are undoubtedly both Union and Confederate sympathizers present this evening. As one travels our country, one will hear the conflict referred to as the act of northern aggression. You've heard that expression before. As you travel north, the reference becomes the Great Revolt. Southern ladies of charm have been known to reference the war as a time of great unpleasantness. Indeed, it was unpleasant. Therefore, I would like to remind you that Mr. Myers is a veteran of two wars, neither of which is a civil war. So, I ask that you not respond to any segment of his presentation with either cheers nor jeers. To introduce you this evening to his great-grandfather, please welcome Mr. Urban G. Myers.
Nice to be here. I appreciate you folks having us here. Wonderful meal. We all enjoyed it, and we'd like to extend our thanks for it and the preparation you made. Dick and I has conversed a few times over the telephone, and so we come up with a little deal here. I'm going to be pretty brief tonight with the time allotted. I want to get you guys involved. I don't study the Civil War battles for 50-some years now. To find out who won, I'm not into that. and why the South lost. I feel for both of them. I respect their flag. I had a great-grandfather Yankee that fought in the 53rd Pennsylvania, and I'm sure if he was here today with his buddies and his Confederates that he was up against, there'd be no animosity. That was proven on the 150th anniversary at Gettysburg. They all shook hands and pitched their tents and stuff like that and enjoyed the heck out of each other. That's what we should be doing today, and that's what I'm doing. I have no animosities. Johnny Reb fought the best that any soldier ever fought with what he had. He didn't have the equipment a lot of times. He didn't have the material, and their communications was not the greatest. But they used what they had, and they did a heck of a job. If any of you folks do venture and buy my book, you'll see the last page and a half is somewhat devoted for the Confederates that fought in that war. And I want you to know that I would like to meet all of you personally after I'm done here yakking away. I've got a picture of the regiment there. It was the 10th anniversary of the dedication of the monument. The 53rd fought in the wheat field at Gettysburg. And this is right east on a little ridge from the wheat field. And it was their bloodiest place at Gettysburg for the Union that they lost the most casualties was in the wheat field. 4,100 people in the wheat field, and that was only Union. That wasn't Confederate. So you can imagine how 25 acres was cluttered with people trying to get out of there, and a lot of them not going out. But anyway, after this is all over, if you'd like to come up and look at the pictures and help yourself, I just brought it along. I don't do this much anymore, speaking, because I'm getting, my wife says I'm getting too old, and I forget too much stuff. And I'm pretty good at dates, but I'm lousy at names. But anyway, let's kick off the lecture here a little bit and discussion about how I got started, and we'll do a little bit of the book. I want to give you a couple highlights of the 53rd and their battles. I wrote a couple notes down, but I never prepare anything for a talk. Every talk I give is different. So it's new to me. I just get up here and talk, and I don't know anybody that does a better job than that than my daughter there. She's good at talking. But anyway, is there anyone here had relations, forefathers that was in the Civil War? All right, 2, 3, oh wow, look at this. Sal, load that musket. Okay, all right, well anyway, Dick there explained pretty much how I got hooked in the Civil War by my grandmother, oldest daughter under Michael McCall. He was the private in C Company of the 53rd. And when I was about 4 to 6 years of age, she would tell me stories about the Civil War. And one day I asked her, I said, "Grandma, where'd you read all this?" She said, "I didn't read it." She said, "I got it up here." And she said, when I was a girl, I used to go to the reunions, C Company reunions, sometimes 2 times a year. And she said, I used to listen to the old soldiers tell stories. And she told me a raft of stories. I'd give all my money that we have if I could just remember those stories, because they were so interesting. And so anyway, that's where I got hooked. From there, of course, I was quite young, and she kept talking to me about it. Instead of reading Little Red Riding Hood to me, she'd tell me about them stories. And so we, the Korean War came along, and I was going to basic training, and one thing she said to me the last time she ever said anything to me, she said, "Irvin, don't you forget your great-grandfather's regiment number and his company." I said, "Okay, Grandma." So I left, and that was the last I ever seen her. But, and I know one thing, if there's anybody in heaven, she's there. She was a very religious gal, and she worked in the fields all her life up till she's 72. And I wondered how she do that, but she did it. Anyway, enough for Grandma. About 30 years ago, maybe in the 70s, I got to thinking I'm going to gather some information about this regiment. First, I got information about my great-grandfather from the archives in Washington, month-to-month record. And I started collecting anything that I could find in libraries and so forth. And so you could say I've been collecting stuff for a long time. The last 8 years, or excuse me, the early 90s, I started really seriously researching. Would have been about 92, 93. I started going to the archives in Washington, Carlisle Barracks, Harrisburg Museum, writing to newspapers all over the East Coast practically, 48 of them from Pennsylvania, and I got a lot of information out of it. Actually, I had a stack of stuff about that high, and I thought, well, if I ain't got enough stuff now, I never will to write a book. So I started writing about 97, and a year and a half later, I was finished with the manuscript. Then it took me a year to get it edited, which I think she did a good job, didn't she, Dick? And it was a lady had been out of college about 4 years, and she was good. So I'm very proud of the book, and it's the only thing I accomplished except my wonderful wife and 3 daughters. And oh yeah, I built an ultralight airplane, dumb enough to fly it. That was 2 15 minutes of fame. So anyway, I started hunting a publisher, and I found one in Shippensburg, Pennsylvania. In 2004, the book was published. It's been 10 years since it's been out. It's done real good. It sold the hard copies, and we're now on the last of the soft copies, and I think there's about a little bit less than 300 left, and then she'll be all over. But I'm going to start hanging it up here pretty soon, because I'm not a speaker as I was before, and I never was Paul Harvey. So anyway, but I've had a lot of fun. I've enjoyed people just like you. You talk about Confederates and Yankees. I've gave lectures in Florida, Lower Alabama, and Georgia, and a lot of places, you know, that could have some bad memories, which we all did, or they all did. But anyway, I've had good returns. The best book selling I ever had was in Franklin, Tennessee. Can you believe that? I told my buddy, I had an Army buddy, lived in Franklin, or Columbia, and I said, Bill, and it was a reenactment in Franklin. He says, bring some books, and he said, we'll go out there and see if we can sell a few. I said, Bill, those guys ain't gonna buy no 53rd Pennsylvania book. Well, I sold every one I had, case and a half of books. I wish I'd have took more. But anyway, so you never know where you're gonna run into people that really are interested in our history. Folks, if we don't get these young folks and get some history in them, we're gonna lose this country. That's talking from the heart. I'm not a Republican or I ain't a Democrat, but I vote for common sense. And right now, gentlemen and ladies, we don't have any. And I'm not cutting anybody down, but you know what I'm talking about. Okay. Let's see, 2004, I started traveling. I've traveled from Long Island to Ohio, Kentucky, Tennessee, Virginia, all the states in between. And I enjoyed it the whole way through, and I'm just about talked out on the thing because, like I said, I just get up and talk. I don't have any set thing, and I should do that, but it's too late now. Okay, let me go ahead and explain. What time do we got, Dick? How long do I got? Huh?
20 minutes.
20 minutes, okay. All right. I would like to explain just briefly a little bit of history of the regiment. The regiment was from 13 different counties in Pennsylvania. They were not a localized regiment, which would have been so much easier for researching. They were from Montgomery County on the east, right above Philadelphia, clear to Westmoreland, right out of Pittsburgh on the west. So I had a lot of traveling to do. I had to talk and give a history on each company. There was 10 companies in the regiment, and there was 13 counties to visit. So that was a lot of traveling. But anyway, they were mustered in the service in October of 1861. They were train loaded down to Harrisburg by companies. None of them knew each other. They just came from all over the county. Mr. Lincoln called for 300,000 people, and that's when the 53rd was born. They got together in the last part of October, and on the 7th of November, they were federalized in the United States military and headed south into Virginia for the winter. And they stayed in the southern part of Virginia until the end. They trained, they marched, they drilled, and got the learning to be the aspects of a soldier. And then in 1 June of 1862 was their first major battle. They didn't do bad. They, in casualties, they lost 94 people, killed, wounded, and missing. But they did a heck of a job, and from then on, they were recognized as a steady, good fighting, dependable unit. And that's what they had to do to establish themselves. They had to make that first one a good one. In fact, if I remember right, I can't remember the brigade it was, I think they met some Tennessee fellas there at Fair Oaks. That was right before the 7 days battle started. They went through the 7 days battle, and from there on, their next major battle was at Antietam. We all know that was the bloodiest day in American history. I don't know, I think it was including 9/11 as far as killed, but that was a bloody day. And they did all the major battles, Gettysburg, they fought in Fredericksburg. That's where I got the title of the book, incidentally, from Fredericksburg. Is anybody here familiar with the Battle of Fredericksburg? Okay. You know, the Georgia boys had that stone wall. They were behind 5 ranks deep, and there was no Yankees made it up that hill. They all were shot down. This regiment, I can't find any regiment that had advanced any farther than the 53rd Pennsylvania as a unit. Now, there were small groups of people made it up to that wall as they're charging Mary's Heights, right outside of Fredericksburg. But they were together as a unit, and they fought until 3 o'clock that afternoon right below that stone wall. They were about 50 yards from that stone wall as a unit. They were in a little cluster of buildings which gave them protection. They fought there till 3 o'clock that afternoon and ran out of ammunition, and the Confederates 50 yards away. So Colonel John R. Brooke was their colonel commander, and he didn't know what to do, so he said, fix bayonets. So they put the bayonets up, and they put them up, everybody could see them pretty much, and they stayed there till 8 o'clock that night, and nobody ever charged their position, because they could have overrun them without a shot fired, because they had no ammunition. They had used all the ammo. But the title of the book was where I got it there at that stone wall. Hancock sent a courier up to John R. Brooke, the commander, and he said, tell Brooke to hang on and keep his position at all hazards. And Brooke, I would imagine, I don't know how he reacted, but he said probably, well, we'll do it. We might as well die here. That's where I got the title for the book. So we go on to Gettysburg. Well, there was Chancellorsville and all those battles in between, and I'm skipping over this. And we got to Gettysburg. There was only 135 people at Gettysburg in the regiment, officers and everybody. A, B, and K Company was dispatched on Provost Guard duty, marching prisoners from Gettysburg to Westminster, Maryland. So the whole regiment had 7 companies, which consisted of 130. They lost 85 or 81 there at Gettysburg and the wheat field. Has anyone ever studied a little bit about the wheat field, the battle there, which was called the Whirlpool of Gettysburg? Anyway, Gettysburg wheat field was taken 6 times by Confederates, the Union, Confederates, and Union, in about 35 to 40 minutes. Can you believe that? That's hard to believe. But it was just a mess. And actually, it all ended up there in about, not quite an hour. The brigade was getting surrounded by Longstreet's charge on the 2nd day, not the 3rd day. And so they had to retreat. They had to get out of there, and they retreated back to the Wheatfield Road and kind of got together there and made it back to Cemetery Ridge. And they counted, I think, 55 people left in the regiment. The biggest battle that they were in, the most costliest battle, was the Battle of Spotsylvania Courthouse. Anybody ever been down to the Mule Shoe, what they called the Mule Shoe? Robert E. Lee had a defensive line, looked like a mule shoe on the map. Anyway, that was their most costliest battle. They lost 177 people there. It was a fight all day long. It was one of the bloodiest fights in the Civil War in the Eastern Theater that I can find. It was close up, one log battis after the next trenches, and after a bit the trenches were filled with people. It was a mess. And they said it was the most lead flying in such a small area as any place probably in the history of the world. There was oak trees anywhere from 18 inches to 22 inches cut off by rifle fire. There was a captain or a major in the Confederate Army from Georgia. He had 10 guys killed there by a 22-inch oak tree that fell on them and killed 10 of them. Right there, and that had to have been a place that was not healthy till midnight that night. From 4:30 in the morning till midnight that night, the battle went on. And the reason the 53rd paid so dearly there, Hancock charged 20,000 men at that mule shoe. Now Pickett only had 12,500. And Hancock was in charge of a couple, quite a few divisions and a corps, and he marched 20,000 people in the 53rd and the 61st New York were in the front line. So that explains why their casualties were so heavy. And then there was some still old veterans. They called them the Spirit of 61. That was the old veterans that when the war started, they immediately enlisted and stayed in the service. Some of them were wounded 3 to 5 times, and they would heal up and re-enlist. And they were extraordinary people. That's why we're good people. We're sturdy people. We had good bringings up. We had good stock. Anything else, ma'am? Do you have any more questions? Anybody else? Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
Do you remember any of the stories that your grandmother used to tell you?
I was afraid you'd ask me that. I remember one that's just kind of like a fuzzy dream. I don't even know where it was. It sounded to me like it might have been in the winter of '62. There was frost on the ground. They were in a cornfield. They were bivouacking in this cornfield. And all they had was blankets, and they had a rubber gum blanket they laid on, and their overcoat and whatever they could grab to pull over them. The next morning, the Confederates charged them, and they ran right over C Company. There was probably not maybe more than 20, 30 people in C Company that fall. It was pretty well wiped out then by Antietam. Anyway, she said that my great-grandfather couldn't get up. His hair was froze to the ground, so it must have been cold. But they charged, and they charged over him, and I know he wasn't captured, and but that's about all I can remember of that one time. And but for, I know, 3 years she would tell me stories, and that'd be the first thing I do. Come on, Grandma, tell me some stories. And she would, and I don't think she made them up, because she had no military experience and didn't have she couldn't have made too much of those stories up. And but he poor old boy, he didn't make it past 47. It wasn't the Gettysburg wound that killed him, it was typhoid. And he died in '86 after the war, and with typhoid. They said the last 10 years, he was a farmer, and they said the last 10 years of his life, he couldn't hardly do anything. Typhoid's not an easy way to go. Okay, if there's no more questions right now, let me go over a couple things here. I wanted to tell you briefly, just skim over the book a little bit. And 5 minutes. See what I'm telling you? Time goes when you're having fun. Huh? Okay, I wanted to go ahead and tell you what was in the book in case you might want to get one. You don't, If there's none here left, or somebody buys them all and you still want a book, why, don't worry about it. Just see Dick. I'll see that he gets them. I'll order some. I'm going to order a couple cases before they run out, because that'll be it. And right now, my hard copy, I'm sorry you guys didn't get a chance to get some hard. On Amazon, they're selling for $549 a piece.
Hello.
I wish I'd have got a case, huh? Okay, in Amazon, online, which I am not now, the hard copy book is selling for $549. Now, they've only got a certain amount of them. They don't have cases of them, you know. But anyway, the book contains a preface. I've got acknowledgments, and I've got a little bit of an introduction. There's 23 chapters, 33 photos, and 21 maps. The maps are done mostly by a real good illustrator. He's a park ranger at Gettysburg, and he is good at drawing maps. He makes a beautiful map. And the rest of them are all Second Corps, Army Corps maps that drawn from the history of the Second Corps. I've got a complete roster of the unit, 1,993 names. I've got their rank, how many years they joined for, and the disposition, what happened to them, killed, wounded, captured, whatever. I've got every paragraph in my book is documented. I've got the notes for it in the back of the book. I've got a bibliography, and there's a index. If the publisher would have left me alone, I'd have had a 400 and some page book. But he said, nah, nobody reads books like that anymore. He said they get to 300 pages, and if they get that far, he said they do something else. He said, cut her down more. Well, he cut me down 3 different times. And so finally we agreed for what we got now. And I'll give you the casualties here of the regiment in 3 years and 8 months of fighting. There was 200 killed on the battlefield. That was right there that day, that instant. There was 2 days, 2 weeks, 2 years later, 20 years, whatever, died from battle wounds, just like everybody, north and south. They all went, not on the battlefield, but a lot of them went after the fight was over. There was 363 wounded soldiers in the unit. 232 died of disease. The worst killer, and I think the Confederates had about the same diseases that killed them, and that was typhoid and dysentery. That was the 2 biggest killers. There was 85 captured, 56 of them died in prison, and they had a grand total of 880 casualties in 3 years and 8 months. This was a report of Colonel Minsker. He lives in, his great-grandson lives in Maryland right now. I got to talk to him, called me up, and he said, hey, are you the guy that's writing the history of the fishing? I said, yes, sir. He said, well, he said, my great-grandfather was the colonel of that regiment at the end of the war. And of course, we have met now quite a few times on battlefields and things like that, and he's a good old boy. They fought 26 major battles. That was bad battles, not just little skirmishes, but 26 good battles. They had over 60 engagements in those 3 years. They belonged to the Army of the Potomac, 2nd Corps, 1st Division, 4th Brigade. That was the brigade and division that they fought in. They had commanders such as Edwin Sumner, Winfield Scott Hancock. I know you've heard of that guy, huh? Anybody hear him? Okay. That was their commander. Did you hear, Sue? Okay, good. Okay, let's see here. Oh, yeah, they got to participate in the Grand Review down in Washington at the end of the war, reviewed by Grant. And, of course, the president was gone then. He was killed on the 14th, I think it was, and this was on the 23rd of May, or the 14th of April, and this was the 23rd of May. Anyway, the unit was a unit that got no publicity hardly at all. Let me see the hands of veterans here in this place. Do we have some veterans? Well, thank you for your service. I think probably the veterans of those years probably celebrated more than any war that we've ever participated in. They got together years afterwards. So many people became friends, had friends in the South after the war, and vice versa. It was a bad thing that ever happened. We hope and pray it never happens again. There was 950 went in originally in '61. Over those 3 years and 8 months, there was 1,993 people went through the regiment. Either got discharged, captured, wounded, killed, whatever. It was over 1,900 went through the regiment. But there was 90 in the regiment when it was discharged at Appomattox, or not discharged, but when they were discharged in Washington, D.C. But at Appomattox, the unit was just a shadow of a unit. And they picked up quite a few people when they marched back to Washington and got them out of hospitals, the ones that could walk, and some of the guys were on crutches in that parade. And but 90 people was mustered out. Anybody have anything else? Well, I'll tell you what, it's been my pleasure. I hope you all had a good time, whatever. I know I did. And don't you forget the history now of the country, okay? All right. Because these kids are the only thing that's going to carry this on. Our schools are not. And our government is not. They are, I think, ready, locked, and loaded to destroy our history. Now, I shouldn't say that maybe, but I mean it. I said it and I mean it. But anyway, thank you again, folks, for coming, I believe.
Share our book with you, the Bountiful Boones Creek book.
Oh.
Yeah, it has over 50 homes and some lovely recipes, and it's just
Wow,
you'll enjoy
right.
it, and so will your wife too.
Well, sure
Okay.
she will. I know that. She loves to cook.
Well, thank you for being here, and everyone come up and say hello to
Yeah.
Mr. Myers and ask him any questions that you want to.
Come up, if you all would like to, I'm not pressing you to buy a book. Come up and look at the book and get an idea what, I don't like that or whatever. But come up and look at it and shoot the breeze with me. I'd love to talk to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very
Yeah.
much. Good to see you here.